Hello and welcome to this ministerial session of Rewired, where we're going to look ahead to education in 2021, just around the corner. Clearly, these are difficult times in education. You can say that children are the least vulnerable to the coronavirus, but there's probably no group that has been more deeply affected by the public policy responses to contain this virus than school children. In March this year, we had 1.5 billion young people around the world locked out from their schools, and those school closures are going to throw very long shadows over their well-being and the well-being of our nations. Of course, children who had learned how to learn, who had access to amazing digital resources, a supportive ecosystem around them, parents and teachers included, they found their way around this. But the many young children who had no one to look after them, who did not have access to technology, and who had never studied and learned on their own, they were just left very, very badly behind. And this crisis has also, gone beyond the academic side. I think we all figured out that education is not just a transactional business. It's first and foremost a relational, a social enterprise. These are issues I think we need to get to as well. But now, lots of things have happened since the first wave of the pandemic. We have much better data now showing that children are not, particularly young ones, not the kind of super spreaders, and that most school systems have sort of figured out how to, reconcile safety and social distancing with presential learning. So basically schools are reopening even if the virus is still around. We've also probably understood that, keeping schools safe inside is better than having them run around outside schools without any kind of supervision. But third, and perhaps most importantly, we have seen unprecedented, not just technological, but also social innovation in education. We are beginning to see examples where technology is not just conserving existing practice, but truly transforming this. We've seen less reform, maybe, but certainly more change in education. But I think it's also clear that just returning to the status quo is not going to work. It will leave education far behind what society expects and demands. We need to come out of this differently and better, and that's exactly our agenda today. We are going to focus on the what, the how, and also the who of building stronger and more inclusive education systems. What is going to take? How will we do this? And who do we need to actually make a difference? And with great education leaders here from Cambodia, from Ecuador, from Sierra Leone, and the United Arab Emirates, we have the dream team here for this discussion. I'm saying this because these are countries that know how to manage transformation in education, how to manage deep crisis. We always talk about countries like Finland or Japan, but they've taken half a century for what we now need to achieve in a few years. So I think the group that we have here in front of us is just an amazing dream team for this discussion. And Monserrat, let me start with you. You had put Ecuador on an amazing reform track and actually also built a very strong coalition for change, for reform in Ecuador. And suddenly COVID strikes and puts everything into question. Tell us a bit about the challenges you faced, but also what did you discover as your biggest strengths to manage the situation?
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, for your meaningful introduction. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you to Dubai Care for this opportunity and for all your support. Well, Ecuadorian education system has 4.5 million of students. 75% belongs to public education. The big challenge is that according to the World Bank, in Ecuador, years of schooling adjusted for the quality of learning could fall by up to 10%. So we have implemented remote and virtual education through different platforms and resources, such as guides in 12 ancestral languages to implement the curriculum that is based on life skills. In this context, the objectives of the Emergency Educational Plan are centered in inclusion and equity. There are first, psycho-emotional support focused on prevention of violence. Second, the guarantee for access to learning and the reinforcement of school retention with an emphasis in students and families living in poverty. And third, the continuity of the educational process in different and optional scenarios and modalities. The challenge is to understand that it's not just about connectivity, like you said. It is also that connection with close people, teachers, and family is very important, and that this is the best way to avoid school dropout. In this sense, each home has a teacher who communicates with the family to support learning and emotional health. Is why we have been able to reach the 9th month of isolation in the educational model called We Learn Together at Home. Therefore, to face the great challenge of closing gaps of educational inequality and inclusion, we have made the system more flexible. And for this, it was necessary changes in regulations and agreements with all sectors of society. During the health crisis, more considering that we have approximately 2,000 rural schools with 1 or 2 teachers. Therefore, the curriculum must be contextualized according to the students' needs and cultural characteristics. And for the progressive return to classes, we have an educational continuity plan that offers greater autonomy and responsibility to schools according to their needs and a diagnostic evaluation and differentiated pedagogical support. The challenge in which we are advancing to guarantee the right and quality in education is to make the school and learning a place of integral development for the entire community. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monserrat. And I think the examples that you present, broadening what students learn, to put greater emphasis on life skills, on student well-being, maybe that's something we should take away from this crisis for the longer term future. Also, your remarkable efforts to make this a whole of society project. And, we could be talking about, your effort also to take PISA for development, where you actually, assessed not just students in school, but also the ones who are not yet enrolled in school. And then finally, how you build local capacities, strengthening autonomy. I think these are big, powerful lessons, I think, for the future. Dr. Hangshong Naron from Cambodia, let me come to you. Perhaps, the context has been more favorable in Cambodia. Cambodia acted really very quickly to put, safety, health, very quickly, the arrangements in place. So schools were maybe not as much affected. But tell us about, your main takeaways from this, the strengths that enabled you to move through this crisis so far.
Thank you, Andreas. Good morning, afternoon, everybody. I think, for the schools now, it is important to create new normal. Even though Cambodia is not affected, but we must be very careful. Take precautionary measures. That's why we must create new normal, a standard for new normal in the school. Number one, the school should create school management committee to involve health officials, local authority, and parents to support the school, to share information, to prevent the risk of outbreak in school. Number two is to improve wash sanitation and also to focus on school health. Number three, we have to divide class into 2 shifts because we have, like 50 students in a class. So we have to reduce to 30 the utmost, so that we can ensure the learning and ensure the social distancing. For that reason, we must also continue online education for the half of the school. So we introduced blended learning approach, face-to-face and online. If the children do not have a technology, then we use paper-based approach and also provide textbook to the student who do not have access, so that and also the teacher prepare question and answer, so that there is the continued learning even they are not in school. And also we must simplify and prioritize curriculum, so that we cannot deliver everything So focus on essential subjects and also reduce the number of lessons to focus on the main lesson. We decided to create a center for digital education. We get the funding from the Ministry of Finance so that we have to make the e-learning system a way forward, for the future, even after COVID environment. We must improve the library and transform it into the digital classroom and deliver in a flash drive the digital content, the videos of all the lesson, so that we deliver in the school because of many of the schools do not have internet access. Also, we must continue to address the problem of students with special needs, encourage them to use TV, but also to use radio, but also to use paper-based for students with difficulty of hearing and visual difficulty. We also encourage the student council to get involved in counseling, in support for each other. So overall, we build the coalition with development partner, with other ministry, so that we can continue education and especially invest more in school facility, especially school health. And we decided that we should improve teacher, the reform of teacher education. Because even with COVID, we understand that there's a need for the teacher to embrace technology. Therefore, we integrate technology into teacher training center and invest in technology in the teacher training center, train them to use Google Classroom, to use technology, and also to deliver blended learning. So I think we must continue to invest in teacher training so that we can deliver quality education, but with reduced time and also with prioritized curriculum. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Minister. And again, this is such an impressive reform efforts that you have been able to. I think also your success to actually bring, your finance minister on board, to actually make a compelling case why this is the time to actually mobilize more resources for education. I hope we can learn more about this later in this session. The way in which you have used technology, not, let's just use a one-size-fits-all model, but you have looked carefully what technologies are available at the front line and to use them differentially. I think these are remarkable takeaways for all of us. I'd like to come to the UAE Minister. Jameela Muhairi is unfortunately not with us today, but she's left us with the video. I hope we can play that now.
Greetings to all. Thank you so much for this opportunity to participate in this forum. Allow me to reflect on our experience in the UAE. Initially, over the first few months, we were in a crisis management mode. Our national response to the pandemic was immediate. The priority was to keep students safe and ensure they were all connected. We shut down schools. But we also made the decision to continue delivering teaching and learning remotely in all public and private schools in the UAE. The decision was made really easier because of the great investment of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum to develop a UAE technological infrastructure. In the UAE, we launched the Smart Learning Program as early as 2012. The coordination of effort during the crisis was key to our success. For example, our national telecom provider granted free internet access to the household. Collaboration between the Ministry of Education and satellite companies like Eliasat help us in connecting with our students in the remote areas and the internet through satellite, giving them access to learning platform and digital resources. Also, hundreds of individual donors and charities join us on this. focusing on providing a digital device to students and family across the UAE. For example, Dubai Cares launch education initiative to help us on collecting and donate IT devices to those in need. Us as a Ministry of Education, we provided 1,000 of laptops and tablets, and for our student represent from Ministry of Education also negotiate with the publisher, and we were really able to grant a free access to our technology platform and digital resource for private and public who struggle to provide online learning. MOE also, what we did, we partnered with different universities such as Sheikh Hamdan University and different universities to provide training to all teachers on managing remote learning. The second phase of our strategy was to plan for the following academic year. Of course, under the leadership of our Education and Human Resources Council, us as a Ministry of Education and other key stakeholders consulted with the business group, with the operators, school operator, to explore a range of scenarios to ensure continuity of education in both private and public education in UAE. What I want to consider also as a strength of our experience are the lesson we have learned and how this has allowed us to reimagine our education system. The pandemic pushed us to adopt laws and that encourage multiple forms of education services and review existing policies of distance learning and others. So what we have also identified areas of improvement that we have already started to address. We appreciate that technology can support us and move forward towards more personalized approaches and ensuring that teachers' training meets all the needs. Teachers need to be trained very differently on using technology. And very
Yeah, another great example for how we can mobilize all of society, to collaborate with the textbook industry, to get publishers on board, to get communities involved in this. Again, I think the UAE has also reacted remarkably speedily to the challenges, and you could see there are some very important lessons also taken for the future. Let's complete that first part with a perspective from Sierra Leone. PG, I'm looking forward to your thoughts on what the crisis has done to you, but also what you discovered as important strengths that helped you manage this.
Thank you very much, Andreas. I want to first apologize that my minister is not able to join the conversation. He was avoidably summoned for an emergency cabinet meeting. In terms of Sierra Leone, we've been able to, in 2018, the president launched the free quality education. And this was to improve access and quality. And over the last 2 years, against this backdrop, we're able to add over 600,000 learners to the education system, accelerated gender parity. We established more schools, 4% more schools. Within 2 years, we're able to add 17% more pre-primary school, introduce radical inclusion, and the government put forward, allocated about over 20% of government government funding towards the free quality education. But in the middle of that, COVID hit. So we were making a lot of gains, but then kind of realized that actually now with the COVID crisis, places were shut down. You had to have a lot of restrictions. And so we kind of started looking to see, well, how can we look to continue improving access? That part of the government's agenda is to include everyone and enable greater access to learning and education. Some of the things that we were able to do was to partner with private sector. So we had a partnership, for example, with Coursera through the World Economic Forum, where we're able to make thousands of courses available to citizens across the country. But given that we know that access to connectivity is also a problem, we worked with the MNOs to be able to provide free access to digital and online learning platforms. We worked with the private sector to be able to come up with ways that we can be able to reach larger audience. So we used a lot of radio, provided radio teachings, and where people can be able to phone in to engage and learn. We used television, the television services as well, and also worked with private sector and international development organizations that we'd been working with to be able to provide and produce content in the whole, to be able to provide and produce content for our learners. We kind of took a hybrid approach to ensure continuous learning. So we used a modern technology, we use USSD, and we use simple radio. And we also worked with communities and the Teacher Services Commission to be able to make learning accessible over this period.
Thanks so much for sharing your experience. And I think it's another great example for this is the moment of crisis where you can tap into a lot of existing resources in communities, and where there is, broadband radio, as you say, can be an important substitute. I think it's another really powerful example. All of you have highlighted how, technology that used to be at the margins of education suddenly has become the lifeline for education in this moment of crisis. And I just ask you for a brief reflection, what do you think is going to stay from this? Now, when we move back to normal, what do you think will remain? And Monserrat, if I may start with you again.
Well, we have made profound changes based on the education we need for the new realities. And now we are not only talking about classrooms, but about learning environments. For example, home, parks, hospitals, rehab centers, and others. And in any stage of life, I think that that's a very profound change. And the school is understood as a place of sociocultural transformation, together with the families to before, and with interaction with the sports, artistic, entrepreneurship, health, harmony with the natural environment. In this sense, it is necessary to make all the components of the educational system more flexible to ensure inclusion and equity, the standards, the modalities of education like face-to-face, distance programs, or homeschooling, the curriculum, the evaluation of learning, teaching skills that reinforce the relationship between studies and work life, etc. But the priority now for us is avoiding school dropouts. We have carried out an approach with 4 components: academic, teaching, emotional, and active research, all these supported by a communication strategy. We want to strengthen all EdTech programs that strongly includes all the community in a digital culture and digital citizenship. with respect of cultural diversity and special needs. With these educational changes, we seek to reinforce a personal and comprehensive development with emotional awareness of our own and of the other, with communication skills, with empathy, solidarity, and a collaborative attitude to solve problems and make decisions for the common good. We want to make emphasis in the development of critical thinking and an ecological and systemic vision based on self-knowledge and metacognition to analyze how we learn better and through evaluation in real context with creativity and innovation. That's the transformation and that we want to consolidate. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing. And I think it's so interesting how you use technology, not just to transform the methods of education, but also to fundamentally rethink the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes and values that Ecuador will need to be successful in the 21st century, including not just the cognitive, but also the social and emotional aspects. Dr. Chuon Naron, you have already shared with us the new normal in Cambodia, but do you have some reflections on what elements of technology will stick? What do you expect?
Thank you. You mean what remain after COVID?
Yeah, exactly. What do you think is there for the long run in Cambodia to transform education?
Okay. Yeah, I think, I have 6 points. I think, what will remain in place is that we will continue to focus on technology to transform education, blended learning, and also to make education responsive to the needs of the society, of the economy. Number 2, during COVID, we realized that social contact is very important. So education is not just about knowledge, but also school is about socializing, social contact, and support. I think that we should focus on that. Number 3, I think we need to maintain the partnership between the school and the rest of the economy, between the school and other sector, with the connection between the school and the community. I think that should continue. Number 4, I think we should also focus on emotional intelligence. We know that very important. Not just intellectual, not just academic knowledge, but emotional intelligence. We support but also we realize that some of the counseling at school very important, psychological support for school, for the children in need, also very important. So we must have the teacher specialize in counseling to provide support in school. Last but not least, we must focus on education for global citizenship. We know that COVID is a global phenomena, and we think that what else will come? What will be new challenges or new crises? Therefore, in the education for global citizenship, I think we must look at our curriculum, and we must try to review that so that to raise that awareness to be a good national citizen, but also to be a good global citizen. We must focus on skills, on knowledge, but also on on global issues at school as well, so that how to prepare for the citizens for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also, I think the point that you highlight, how technology and digitalization will transform the role of teachers, moving from just being instructors to becoming good coaches, good mentors, good facilitators, good evaluators. And I think that kind of transformation is probably even far more challenging than just the kind of technological changes that we see ahead. PG, do you have any reflections on that from the perspective of Sierra Leone? What elements of the technologies that you've put in place you see as a medium and long-term future for education in your country?
Thank you very much. I think in terms of Sierra Leone, we were able um, to try a lot of different things and to use varying mediums to kind of reach learners, and also to look to enable our teachers and school administrators, and also the community as a whole, because you know, you realize that to be able to, during crises like that, to be able to ensure that young people are still learning, you need a whole community approach. So there was a lot of community sensitization. There was a lot of engagement from the central government and the Ministry of Communication and the Ministry of Education to ensure that communities, families were aware of the opportunities that have been made available. We used a lot of radio programs to be able to ensure learning within the communities. And as we did that, we continued to make changes to the style, the method, and trying to figure out how we will make it a bit more interactive to ensure continuous learning. We, throughout this crisis, one of the technologies that we've used has been USSD technology. And through that, we're now able to kind of put dictionaries in the hands of many more than there was before, using a simple feature phone, dialing star 8876 pound. You're able to kind of search for any word and be able to learn and improve your vocabulary. We've started working a lot on online learning, trying to make sure that we're able to give young people the opportunity to learn on their own, but also as the country is looking at changing the whole curriculum and improving the way we deliver education, we also want to invest in teachers. So looking to see how we can make that available as well for teachers. One of the big things that we saw during the whole crisis was how we use data that we gathered over time, and also reaching out to families and different communities, asking questions, and then using that data to be able to make decisions about what methods of learning and would be best for which communities. And so we had like different approaches in that, and that has been something that we continue to want to continue to use data feedback from communities to consistently improve learning and access for young people.
Thanks so much. I think this is fantastic. I mean, how you use, the crisis and also the emerging data to give people greater ownership and empowerment over what they learn, how they learn, when they learn, and where they learn in Sierra Leone, and to put communities really onto the driver's seat of not just the implementation, but the design of education. I think it's a very powerful lesson. I think we've heard amazing stories about how to manage this crisis and also to grasp the opportunities it presents for the future. And I think your leadership, all of you, is just, I think, exactly what the world needs in this moment. At the same time, I think we need to be realistic about the future. When this health crisis translates into a financial crisis, an economic crisis, employment crisis, education is going to be pushed to the wall. This has happened in the great financial crisis. Now, the value proposition of education was questioned. Policymakers are always going to, prioritize the urgent over the important. What can we do to raise the profile of education? And maybe this is a question I posed to you in Cambodia. I mean, you have been very successful, Minister, to go to your finance minister and say, hey, this is not just about my schools. This is about the future of our country. You have convinced leaders actually to make that priority, to make that investment in the future. Tell us a little bit about, what's behind that and how you have mobilized societal support to make education a priority, because I think that's really what the time after this crisis next year is going to be mainly about.
Thank you, Andreas. I think, to secure funding during this kind of crisis, especially COVID, education must contribute to the prevention or to protection of the population. Firstly, we must, raise awareness, but also train our students of how to protect themselves so that we can maintain education budget. More importantly, I think we must reduce non-necessary spending and prioritize the spending for the the needs, the utmost important priorities. For example, during the COVID, we have to reduce non-essential projects, but refocus and develop new projects for digital education. I think that can get the support from the Ministry of Finance. Number two is to link to the result. We must be able to show the Ministry of Finance the result. Sometimes it's very hard, to show the long-term result, but we must be able to show the short-term result as well, short to medium-term result, so that we can link, the spending to some of the short-term result that we can provide to the Ministry of Finance. And especially, I think we must also maintain on the medium to long-term goal, to the vision of transforming education. If the Ministry of Finance doesn't see why we use that money, so we must have a shared vision. If without a shared vision that we can bring the current education to the vision, and how we're going to do it. So I think that we must prepare very carefully the vision, how we reach that vision, what we want to achieve in the next 10 years, and how we develop program that can contribute to that achievement of vision. Because the Ministry of Finance, they need also to have better trained workforce, because this will contribute to economic growth. Because skills and also reduce skill mismatch is very, very important now for every country. If we are able to show that, look, this education reform not just not just train the people, but train them to meet the needs of the economy, to meet the needs of the investor. What investor needs? Investor need people not just with knowledge, but also with skill, especially soft skill. And I would like to follow on what you said, that teaching method, especially blended learning, and the transform and changing the role of the teacher from just talking, but to guiding, to introduce student-centered approach would lead to maybe the student that have more soft skill. So those kind of of plan and reform program that will get the support of the Ministry of Finance. So we must know what they want also, and then we must prepare and develop project to meet the vision of not just transforming education, but transforming the economy. I think that if we can speak the same language, then we can get a budget. But result-based management is very important. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you make a very, very important case. It's not enough for education to argue a case on moral grounds. I think we need to become better at making the value proposition clear and transparent, and to show, as you say, not just long-term results, but also the short-term impact on economic and social development. So I think education will have its own homework to do if we want to convince, society and finance ministers to make those investments in our collective future. Let me ask all of you one final question, and that is, what should the international community do to support you? What should, donors should be doing? What should international organizations focus on in the couple of years to come? And maybe Monserrat, you can lead us once again, and I need a short answer because we have very little time left.
Yeah, of course. Well, in COVID times, we have the strong support of the United Nations Humanitarian Cluster, and we formed an advisory committee with international organizations, among which are UNESCO, UNICEF, VVOB with the support of Dubai Care and OAE, IBD, World Bank, and the private sector. And it has been a humanitarian, technical, and economic support, essential support. And building back better for a post-pandemic world, the donors and other members of the international educational community should be, maybe for us, advise ministries of education through information to take decisions based on evidence to strengthen public education policy in order to facilitate universal access to education, reduce learning gaps, support teacher development, quality, and ensure learning. Education policies avoid acting on the outside. And it is important when providing international assistance that it is effective, but more important is that it is aligned with the country's educational needs and priorities. For example, in the case of Ecuador, in post-pandemic times, priorities focus on reducing school dropout and learning poverty, mental health and psycho-emotional support, strengthening digital citizenship starting in schools, improving water, sanitation and hygiene infrastructure to avoid the spread of COVID. In addition, it is important that interventions by international organizations are carried out directly on the ground in coordination with the international experiences and evidence-based policies. And to achieve results on interventions, international organizations need to be aligned to countries' priorities, expanding capacities of governments. That's what we think, and we are always very thankful about the international cooperation support.
Yeah, I think this is, a great kind of set of paradigms. In a way, I think this crisis has brought all of us so much closer together. And international organizations, really, I've never seen the level of intensive day-to-day collaboration towards one common goal, and that is to support countries in their unique context. I just hope, we will be able to maintain this after the crisis. And I think you should, make those kinds of demands very, very clear to ensure that, the international community is present to help you address the challenges that you face. Cambodia, Minister, your perspective, what you would like to see the international community do to help Cambodia advance its education agenda in the aftermath of the crisis?
Thank you, Andreas. I think first and foremost, education must, focus on our short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals and priority. I think it must be clear that we must continue to focus on our priorities. How to achieve SDG. We know that it's more difficult, but we must not lose sight on the long-term goal. But also we must deliver what is deliverable. But also we must prioritize our plan. Introduce new needs, technology, school safety. Those are the new needs that we must integrate. We must also focus on teacher training. And I think that's why once we have that plan, then the international community must support the plan, because we cannot, I think that we must continue to consult each other. I think changing of ideas, I think how to improve, because I think we must keep learning. So the education and the international community must continue to share best practices, so that but I would like to mention about the capacity building. I think we must focus on capacity building, and then that we need the support of the international community, and also we must get the support from international community to focus on teachers. The new role of teacher. The teacher, they are doing great things during the crisis. They were forced to embrace technology. Now they need also more support on that. So the international community must continue to provide support on teacher, must provide support on the new needs, of school safety and how to integrate technology in order to deliver education. And I don't think that with COVID, we must lose sight on our long-term goal. I think we must continue that, and the teacher should continue to be the backbone and should continue to get the support from international community, and especially capacity building. National capacity building is a must so that education can continue. Thank you.
I think so important points, it's not just about material resources, it's very much also about, the sharing of expertise and experience, the mobilization of good practice. In a way, even within countries, we spend so much time, to push ideas into schools and often take too little time to find the good ideas at the front line and then to scale and spread them. And I think to do that even globally, I think there's certainly a very important contribution that we can all make collectively. And when, we talk about, international organizations, regional organizations, this is the community that we can bring together in this. PG, from Sierra Leone's perspective, any, expectations you have on the international community?
Thank you very much. I think one of the things that, as you just mentioned earlier, there must be a way to be able to not just force new ideas into schools or into learning centers, but to be able to work with others or the communities and the schools themselves to be able to improve learning and improve the uptake. I think one of the things that we've done here is to set up a incubator. Out of that incubator, we've had like an education innovation, which has looked at various ideas from different organizations and learning providers coming through, piloting it across 176 schools, and then taking that learning from it, using the research, doing evaluation and seeing what actually works and what can be scaled. I think my word to the international community is be willing to support some of those risky ventures, because it is only by continuing to learn every day, continuing to try new ideas, continuing to innovate, that we can be able to push the edges of where we are and improve on what is working and sometimes what isn't working. So I think one of the things that we would say from Sierra Leone is let's continue to try new ideas and also be willing to look at the whole problem holistically, because that affects attendance, which then affects people's ability to learn. So investing in education should be thought of in the context of the community's needs as well.
Thank you so much. I think such an important consideration, creating more space for innovation, for entrepreneurship, for new ideas in education. And in fact, I must say, education in general is not doing so great on that. I think this is something we are so busy, tied up in our operations often that we do not spend enough time and resources. And maybe that's clearly an area where, the global community could come together to, foster innovation. And I know Jameela has left us with some concluding thoughts on this last topic, and I hope we can play her video.
Managing our stakeholders is one of the most important priority we have as a leader of the education sector. Balancing the need to shut down education institution for health reasons and keeping them open to ensure continuation of service and allow parents back to work was a challenge. In the UAE, we did the following. Centralized decision was the first thing that we did. All major decisions were taken based on instruction and guidance of the National Crisis and Emergency Management Authority, the Education and the Human Resources Council with the top level representation from Ministry of Education, all local education authorities, Ministry of Health, Human Resources and Culture, took all the decision relate to setting scenarios providing policies and implementation plan for the education sector. All decisions were made collectively with the local authorities, business group, and school, of course, school operators. A direct line of communication between the top education leaders in federal and local government allow for immediate action in case of emergency. Believe me, WhatsApp turned to be really useful. Second intervention was open resource and choice where possible. Opening channels of communication with the parents and school leaders, including through social media, help us to gain input from the stakeholder regarding their concern and need. Many private schools did not have any kind of technology or online resources to provide quality online learning to their students. We, as a Ministry of Education, provided these schools, the private schools, with the free access to our online platforms and educational resources. In line, of course, with the health and hygiene protocol, and depending on the capacity of a school to implement them. School reopening scenarios option including a range of choices between online or face-to-face, or it was the choice for parents and students to go back to school. But very strict monitoring system have been put in place to ensure all the health and safety for our children and teachers are observed at all times. Even though it might be impossible to meet the needs of everyone, but we made a lot of effort to put the safety and the security and the best interest of our students in the heart of every single decision we have made in the UAE. We have made.
So I'm very grateful for those reflections as well. And unfortunately, we have reached the end of the session. We are out of time. I want to just thank you, not just for your generous sharing of your experience during today's session here at RewirEd, but more importantly for the leadership that you provide for education, for the example that you set for how even the most difficult crisis can be addressed, and we cannot just move through the crisis, but also see a brighter future behind it. And let's keep in mind, the future will always surprise us. This crisis has reminded us how fragile our current institutional structures are. Our capacity to innovate will be key, and that is not just about technological innovation. That's just the infrastructure. It will be most importantly about, as many of you have said, social innovation, about building human capacity, about transforming the way in which we use the spaces, the people, the technology, the time in our education systems to design 21st century learning environments. Also, as you said, this is not just a government service. This is a whole of society enterprise. And the reason why you were so successful in your countries is because you were able to build those coalitions who've actually moved things forward. And I think that's again something, where we do not engage teachers and parents and communities in the design of policies, we will not, count on them to help us implementing them. And I think in a moment of crisis, never ask yourself how well people follow your own instructions and ideas, but ask yourself how well your people can collaborate. And I think that is exactly what you have demonstrated. I'm very grateful for platforms such as RewirEd and at Expo 2020 Dubai. These are the kind of platforms that we need to sort of share our own and good practices today. So once again, my thanks to all of you, and I look forward to our continued collaboration.
Thank you. All the best to all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.